I'm Michael Davy, owner of Michael Davy Theatrical Cosmetics and inventor of Foaming Sponge Gelatin. Gelatin makes a fantastic and affordable translucent appliance material, but one of its drawbacks, as with silicone as well, is its weight. While being compressible, reusable, and translucent, it's also heavy in large appliances and can drag the skin, resulting in sometimes difficult facial movements. By foaming gelatin, I've been able to reduce its weight by about 40% while keeping its compressibility. The more air you incorporate into the gelatin, the lighter it is. However, the more opaque it becomes, so there's a trade-off there. Light will still translate through the appliance, but skin color will not. There's also another advantage to using foaming sponge gelatin, and that is that it can translate heat through the appliance better than a solid mass gelatin appliance, resulting in less heat buildup under the appliance. The air incorporated into the appliance will absorb the heat and translate it away from the actor. While foaming sponge gelatin appliances are still not as light as foam latex, you can make them without the electric mixer and baking involved in the foam latex process. Also, the ingredients are all food grade, non-toxic, and instead of baking foam latex appliances for up to 3 hours, we are freezing foam gelatin appliances for only about 30 minutes. Many schools, theaters, or other facilities have found foaming sponge gelatin preferable to foam latex regarding their institution's needs and restrictions. When I invented foaming sponge gelatin almost 15 years ago, back in late 2000, nothing like it existed. Today, there are many variations of my formula available on the internet, but my kits remain the easiest method to achieve a consistent, reliable foam gelatin. There are also gelatins available that call themselves foam, but while it's more translucent, it is far from foam. At best, it's bubble suspended in gelatin. It doesn't reduce weight significantly like foaming sponge gelatin does, nor does it reduce the heat buildup under the appliance like foaming sponge gelatin does, although in all fairness, it is more translucent. Also, foaming sponge gelatin is adjustable. You can adjust the density of the foam you create simply by how you refine it. If you want a denser, more translucent foam, simply refine it longer. You will see this demonstrated in our video segments which follow. Foaming sponge gelatin is available in single batch kits, 5 batch kits, and 10 batch kits. The single batch kit comes with everything you need to process the foam. It has the gelatin base part A, a small individual packet of yeast, a large and small stir stick, a large and small plastic container, and instructions. We also make available tints to add color to your gelatin foam and offer pre-foam kits as well for those who prefer to skip the foaming process. The first step in the process is to release your mold. The mold we're using is one of my stock 4-head molds. I have achieved the best results in a closed mold, but you can spatulate this material into an open mold. However, your results will not be as controlled. The best mold release I've found is simply cooking spray. We start by spraying both the positive and negative halves of the mold liberally with the cooking spray. Once the two halves are sprayed, brush the oil with an inexpensive chip brush to ensure the oil is incorporated into the mold surface. Don't worry about using your mold for something else later, as the vegetable oil is still compatible with most other casting materials. Be sure to remember to apply release to the outside of the mold, as the gelatin will probably run down the side of the mold as you close it. Wipe any excess release away using a paper towel. Some like to powder their molds to help the gelatin into the detail, but this is optional. Also, some like to heat the negative to prevent pinholes, but this is also optional. Once you're finished releasing your mold halves, arrange the mold so that you can easily close it once it's filled. You may need to place blocks under the negative if it does not sit level. This is so the foam doesn't run out before you close it. Now you are ready to prepare your ingredients. The first ingredient we're going to prepare is the yeast. The yeast needs to be hydrated in water before it's ready to use. We're pouring our water into a smaller cup not provided, since we are only using a small amount of water to hydrate the yeast. Open the packet of yeast with a pair of scissors and pour it into the small cup provided. Then, using either distilled or purified water, pour water into the cup until it's almost full. Once you've added the water, stir the mixture until the dry yeast is completely dissolved. Use the small stick provided. You can let it sit for part of this process, and it will still dissolve on its own, but it's faster if you stir. Yeast is a living organism used in bread and brewing. In my process, it reacts with the gelatin component to form gas bubbles just like in beer and bread. The yeast needs to be alive, so always use fresh yeast for this. This process may take a few minutes, but it takes time for the yeast to absorb the water. Continue to add water as the yeast absorbs it until you have a full cup of hydrated yeast. Next, we need to melt the Part A gelatin base in a microwave at 10 to 15 second intervals until it's completely melted. This usually takes about a minute total. Remove the gelatin from its bag. The easiest way is to simply tear open the bag and discard it. Place the gelatin into the larger cup provided by folding the gelatin slab and placing it into the bottom of the cup. Then, place the cup in the microwave and turn it on. Since microwaves vary, this process may vary also. You may need to do 10-second intervals instead of 15, or you may be able to do an initial 30-second interval and then 10-second intervals after that until it's completely melted. Make sure you don't use the small stick to stir this component before it's completely dissolved. Otherwise, you may contaminate the Part A with some of the Part B. Also, avoid overheating the gelatin, or you may destroy the collagen that makes gelatin gel. Also, the hotter the gelatin is, the longer you will need to wait to allow it to cool enough to add the Part B. But more on that later. You can see the lump of gelatin at the bottom of the cup. Keep melting until it's completely gone. At this point, we're not whipping any air into the gelatin, only melting it. Once the gelatin is completely melted, chances are that the liquid is too hot to add the yeast. So what we do is pour the liquid up the sides of the container to cool it. As we scrape this from the sides, it will cool the rest. We don't want to add the yeast too soon while it's too hot, as this may give the hot liquid a chance to go flat, like soda does, while it's in the mold before it gels. Don't be in a hurry to add the yeast, because you can always reheat the gelatin if it gets too thick. When you're ready to add the yeast, pick up the small stick and give the yeast one last stir. Then pick up the larger stick and add the yeast quickly. The foam will rise immediately, maybe even above the rim of the cup, so you will need to stir it quickly. You will notice that the foam will rise as you're stirring. Allow it to rise as you stir. Then, the foam may continue to rise briefly as the yeast finish foaming, but once the foaming action is complete, the refining can begin. After a few moments, you will notice that the foam will begin to fall. The initial rise is volatile and unstable, and this collapse will result in a more stable foam. This is actually the start of the refining process. While you stir, you will notice that larger bubbles will begin to rise to the top of the foam. Refining will break these larger bubbles into more desirable smaller bubbles. This action is similar to that of refining foam latex. The refining process is where you adjust the density of your foam. The more you stir, the denser the foam will be. I usually like a more fluid than fluffy foam, as it is more translucent while having air in it. Once you've reached the density you desire, you can stop stirring and allow the larger bubbles to rise to the top, where you can glide your stick across the top of the foam or slice through the foam to pop them without stirring and refining. Don't be in a hurry to rush through the refining process, as you can always reheat the gelatin. In fact, some prefer to allow the gelatin to set up and then remelt it. This can yield a more uniform cell structure, getting rid of the larger bubbles. Once you are ready to pour the gelatin into the molds, use the stick to pop any last-minute bubbles that may have risen to the top. Then, when you pour from the top of the detail, allowing the gelatin to flow from the top down. Don't pour too much, as this will puddle at the bottom of the mold and may fill your keys. Use your spatula to push the gelatin up the sides of the mold, and as soon as you can, close the mold. The cooler the gelatin is, the better it will cling to the sides of the mold, but not too cool, so that the mold doesn't close completely. Once the mold is closed, flip it so that the positive is on the bottom, allowing the contents to flow down the sides of the inside of the mold instead of out the bottom. Then, hold it or clamp it until it stops foaming. A good idea, if you're not too heavy, is to place the mold on the floor and carefully stand on it, but only if your mold is well constructed with reinforcement and ultracal. Plaster of Paris is not suitable for this. This is a trick taken from foam latex processing, but will yield very thin edges. Then, as soon as you can, move your mold to the freezer. Most molds this side usually take about 30 minutes, but a good way to test is to peel out what is left in the cup, and if it is gelled, then it's a good bet the rest in the mold has gelled too. To begin the process of opening the mold, test the flashing to see if it is gelled. If it is, peel the flashing away from the mold. You don't need to remove the flashing, but you can pull on it to loosen the edges, making it easier to open the mold. Once the foam has loosened, you can separate the mold halves. Be careful not to tear any foam that is still attached to either half. Once the mold is open, inspect the appliance for defects and powder just as you would a foam latex appliance. Once the appliance is powdered, place it in either the positive or negative half of the mold to prevent warpage. If you need to store the piece, place the appliance in a bag and store it in the fridge until the day of use. You will need to remove it and allow it to warm up. If for some reason the appliance is unsatisfactory, you can simply remelt it and re-pour it. Just release the mold, just as we did before. Apply the spray, brush, and wipe. Then, place the appliance back into the cup with the rest of the extra material and reheat the gelatin in 10-second intervals again. Reheat it slowly. You don't want to boil the material, as this will destroy the collagen and add unwanted bubbles. Repeat this process as often as necessary until the gelatin is completely melted. Once it's melted enough, use the stir stick and stir the gelatin so it remelts as evenly as possible. Be sure to scrape the sides so that the material doesn't burn. Replace the cup back into the microwave and continue heating for another 10 seconds. Gradually, the lump of gelatin in the cup will dissolve. Each time you remelt the material, it will lose a bit of its foaminess, but even then, it is still more of a foam than many other processes, which are, at best, only some small bubbles suspended in gelatin. Allow the material to sit for a few moments for loose bubbles to rise where they can be picked off. Once the gelatin foam is remelted and refined, you are ready to add any tinting you may decide to use. Add the color gradually, drop by drop. Pick a number of drops, say 8 drops. Then add that number of drops and stir. If you need more, then add another 8 drops. Keep count of the drops you add so that you can make another batch if you need to. Remember that you can always add more, but you can't take it back out. Try not to incorporate any more larger bubbles to the mix than you have to, because you will need to remove these before pouring. Arrange the molds as before. If you need to level the mold to help keep the gelatin in the mold, place something under the negative half. Pour the gelatin foam just as last time and allow it to flow into the mold cavity. Scoop the gelatin up the sides of the detail as evenly as possible. Close the mold and flip just as last time. And just as last time, stand on the mold if possible. If not, just place weights on it or clamp it. Then move it to the freezer for about a half hour. When you're ready to open it, just loosen the flashing on the outside of the mold and pry it open. Inspect the appliance for quality and then powder. And brush off any excess powder. Sometimes I use watermelon as the adhesive instead of acrylic adhesive. Unlike tacky acrylic adhesive or Pros-Aid, the watermelon dries without tack but can be reactivated with alcohol. I coat the backs of the appliances with the watermelon and allow it to dry. Then, when I apply the appliances, I use alcohol instead of adhesive, reactivating the watermelon as I press and hold it into place for a count of 20 to 30 seconds. This way, the person wearing the appliance doesn't need any special remover to remove the makeup when they get home. Then, when I apply the appliances, I use alcohol instead of adhesive. Foaming sponge gelatin is a very versatile material, relatively easy to work with and easy to make up. These are some examples of foaming gelatin used for prosthetics in my makeups. For short-term, quick makeovers, it can't be beat. From my stock molds, I can create a foaming gelatin appliance in under an hour. And if for some reason it's unstable, it's easy to repeat. If your makeup situation is suitable for gelatin, it is suitable for foaming gelatin as well. Thank you for your interest in foaming gelatin. For more information on foaming gelatin or any of my innovative makeup materials, please visit www.michaeldavy.com or call 1-888-225-7026. You can also email me at order@michaeldavy.com.